Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-it-all. So today we are driving to the service center in Decatur, Georgia, because we have a very weird problem with our Model Y, which is exactly 2 months old today. It sounds like there's gravel in the wheels. It sounds like when you drive it that there's like rocks in it or something like that. And I've looked online, and apparently there's a problem potentially with loose brake calipers that could cause this problem. But the service center, when I talked to them about the issue, said that they had no real idea and no experience with that. So that's kind of unfortunate. As you can tell out the window, it is a totally gross and gray day. The car is driving itself. So, I do have my hands on the wheels, obviously, but the car is driving, so I figured I'd just talk to you guys for a while. And my family's in the car too, so in case they say hi. Lane says hi. So anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Joe Rogan Spotify podcast. At least I saw it on Spotify, and I'm going to leave a link to it in the bottom. I was going to listen to about 10 minutes of it or something and kind of, enjoy a few minutes, but it's a complete time suck. It's like 3 hours and 20 minutes long, and I ended up my wife kept going like, what are you watching and listening to? And I was like, shut up. It's so absolutely fascinating listening to Joe and Elon talk. They are just quite the pair. I honestly really wish that I could be in the room with them. So, one day in my dreams, I will be there with a triumvirate with them. And they were drinking scotch too. So I was like, oh man, that just sounds like a perfect evening. So anyway, I wanted to talk about a few things that Elon Musk said. The first one of them is that he said, let me make sure I get this line right. All input is error. Yeah, I wanted to make sure I got that right. By the way, that is now a new t-shirt in our merch store. All input is error, Elon Musk. So I'll put up a picture of it in post, and I try to get it soon because we're only going to have it for a limited time. But I think that's just fantastic. It's one of my favorite quotes ever, potentially. But I wanted to explain a little bit about the context of that. So if you're watching, and let me make sure I get it's about 1 hour and 9 minutes into the conversation. So you can skip to it if you want. But essentially, Elon and Joe are talking about the new Model S Plaid that's coming out with no driver stalks, right? Like I have in the Model Y here. And Elon Musk is saying like the car will predict what it's supposed to do, whether it's supposed to go in reverse or drive, or I guess also turn signals and things. And so the context of it is that Musk was talking about if somebody has to do something like actually swipe on the interface and tell it, no, I want to go into drive, not reverse, that's an error. Or if the person actually has to manually do the turn signal, that's an error. So in other words, Elon Musk is all about the best part is no part, the best process is no process, and now it's sort of like the best driver is no driver. So essentially, he's really, really pushing that vision of a driverless future hard right now, and reiterated again that 2021 is going to be the year for L5 autonomy, as he says. L5 is much more of a legislative thing than it is a technological thing. So I would kind of say L4, which is basically the car drives itself, but that you don't have the legal right to have it drive itself. Like right now, I've got my hands on the steering wheel because I don't have the legal right not to do that, and I'm responsible. So anyway, L4, L5 is more of a regulatory thing. So anyway, I thought that was a super cool thing, but what I really wanted to talk about today was the airbags that are in this car. And all Teslas, at least that were built recently, they are not just ye old simple airbags that deploy if there's an accident. Interestingly enough, Elon Musk said that seatbelts are actually no longer even required. The whole thing started with the fact that Elon Musk was talking about how for years, for decades actually, in the 50s and 60s, the auto industry fought tooth and nail not to put seatbelts into their cars, because who knows why. I don't know why. Every data point showed that people were much safer with seatbelts than they were without it. I mean, basically, you're just a projectile, right? If I'm going 64 miles per hour right now, and if I didn't have a seatbelt on and we stopped rapidly, I would go right through the windshield. So there's obvious safety involved with that. And so anyway, that's a whole other story why they fought that. But the upshot of it is that seatbelts saved a lot of lives. But now we have airbags, of course, that are they're legally required. But Elon Musk talked about how far beyond the basics Tesla has gone. Tesla has got, apparently, if I shift and move over in my seat, or if I move the seat forward, or it knows how much I weigh. I don't even want to say that because it's the winter time and I'm not happy with my weight right now. But anyway, all of those things, it's constantly keeping up with all of that. And Elon Musk he's quoted in there as saying a child sitting incorrectly in the front seat, I assume he means a small child like a toddler or something, who should be in a car seat, that the seat will actually know that. It'll know how much the kid weighs, where the child is, what the weight distribution is, how far back the seat is from the front and obviously the side. And it will make a decision. If there's an accident, it will actually cause... Sorry, just went out of autopilot on me. Because of course I moved the steering wheel too hard. It's always like, geez, you got to touch it just the right amount. Anyway, so it would know exactly where that kid is, and the fact that it was a child because it weighed a small amount. And the airbags would deploy not just in an order around them, but it would deploy at a certain velocity. So it has control over how much gas it's putting into the airbag as it's deploying, and it's doing all of that in real time. And the really interesting thing is that Musk also talked about how the car is learning all the time. So I'm assuming that they're using some sort of machine learning technology, similar to the full self-driving, where it's constantly learning how to deploy airbags better. And that means that every single time there's a software update, or at least many of the times there's a software update, the car is actually improving the airbag deployment system. And I think that's just fascinating. That means that the car is learning constantly to do a better job, and that it's making it even safer. I didn't know this, but apparently Tesla is the only car company that not only has 5 stars in all the main categories from NHTSA, he calls it NHTSA, that's a lot easier to say. But anyway, it not only has it in all the main categories, but all the subcategories. So it's like they are absolutely, without a doubt, leaps and bounds, the safest cars on the road. One other weird little tangent that came up with all of this was that Musk was talking about how NHTSA, the Highway Traffic Safety Administration, they actually have their star rating is different based on how big the car is. So what he was saying was a small car can get a 5-star rating from NHTSA, but that doesn't mean it's safe at all, because they've actually kind of pushed they've moved the curve down. Essentially, they're grading on a curve, right? So you imagine like a student that's not a very good student, and they're saying like, oh, 75 out of 100 is good for you, that's fine. For a bright student, they have to get a 95 or something to get an A. It's a bit of an unfair comparison, and it doesn't mean that car is as safe as you think it does. Because, of course, a small car and a large car, the large car always will win. It's just physics. Anything that's heavier is going to beat anything that's lighter. Under most circumstances. Obviously, there can be weird circumstances that happen. He also talked about how the Model X is the only SUV, and there's amazing video. They actually pop it up during the conversation, that if you full-on push the car into a sand pit sideways, the car will actually roll onto its top and then flip back over again. So it's like I think there was what were they called? The Weebles in the 1980s. My sister used to play with those. They were the little wobble things. They would go upside down and then they would turn right side up again. You can't knock them over. So the Model X is sort of like a Weeble. It will always bounce back up again. So anyway, they spent a lot of time talking about the Model X, actually. Elon Musk kept calling it their Faberge egg, which is sort of like they put so many bells and whistles on it. He talked about how they have the only ultrasonic detectors in the doors that do not have the pucks. So on my car, like, and on most cars, there's like these little pucks, like little round circles, and I'll try to put a picture up here. But basically it's a little piece of plastic instead of metal, and so the ultrasonic sensor can shoot sound through it and then bounce it back and listen. And they built a crazy, crazy system so that it could actually do that through metal, which is incredibly difficult to do. But they didn't want to have pucks in the doors, so they did that instead. Also, I guess, I don't know, but the opening of the doors, you can open it if there's only 18 inches between you and the car next to you, so that's pretty cool. And also, apparently, the gull wings or the X-wings or whatever can dance. And he kept calling it an exercise in hubris, that they were just, their pride was such that they wanted to build like the best, most cool, kick-ass car ever made. And he actually kind of said that the Model X is not really a good thing for Tesla's mission, because it wasn't just the basics of what needed to happen, but they went beyond, and they were just enjoying themselves and building an absolutely crazy thing. So anyway, it makes me want to test drive the Model S. Maybe if they, I don't know how long this service appointment is going to last, but potentially if the service appointment is going to last a while, maybe we can ask to test drive a Model X in the meantime, because I've never actually been in one, and that'd be pretty darn cool. It would especially be cool to drive it after driving this Model Y, which is the same category of car. Of course, it's also an SUV, but this is a significantly smaller SUV than the Model X is. So I think that would be pretty fun and interesting. So anyway, getting back to the airbags, Lane wanted to say
that it was just really cool.
It's really cool. Yeah, it's amazing. And here's a crazy thing. Tesla does not spend 1 second advertising, even on their website, right? I know they never spend any money at all advertising, but they don't have this as a public information. Obviously, it's not some sort of secret, but it's just incredible to think that you've got a company that is doing things. I think it reminds me of Apple in the 1980s when they built the Macintosh, the original one. All of the engineers, Steve Jobs, Wozniak, all those guys, they signed their names into the back of the Mac on the inside that nobody would ever see. It was that idea, the attention to detail of what no one would ever see. And this is one of those things like an airbag. Hopefully you will never experience an airbag deploying in your car during the entire 5 or 8 or 10 years or however long you own the car. You'll never experience that. But just to know that these things are dynamically in real time updating constantly, like the fact that I'm moving around like this means that the airbag deployment system is updating itself to ensure that it will deploy properly no matter what position I'm in, how fast we're going. If I moved the seat forward, it would know that I was a shorter person, so it would deploy differently, which is good for Lane, because she's a whopping...
That helps on trust issues.
She's a whopping 4 feet 12. So like she sits very, very close to the steering wheel, and that can be very dangerous in an airbag deployment situation. But apparently in the seat position and her weight and everything, the car knows. And so it will deploy the airbags differently for her than it would for me. And I think that's absolutely fantastic to know. One more thing I just want to throw in to go back, circle around to the beginning again and talk about the all input is error. I don't know if all of you or any of you have read Jeff Raskin's like absolute classic book called The Humane Interface. It's certainly available on Amazon and stuff. I highly recommend that if you haven't read that book, you should read it. He was one of the designers of the user interface for the Macintosh, and he talks at great length about what he calls affordances, Affordances. They are the things in the world that tell you how to interact with the world. So he's saying if you get to a door, like, you're going out of a building or something, an office building, and if you push that door and it was supposed to be pulled, that is not your mistake, that is the interface designer's mistake. So that is something that is really fascinating. Anyway, it changed my mind when I read this book, like completely mind blown. I was thinking like, this is not my problem. This is the interface designer's problem. And it is up to the interface designer to come up with affordances. In other words, making things look the way that they need to so that there's a natural interaction with your mechanical environment. So that not only goes for physical objects, but it goes for the user interface as well. So if you find yourself constantly making mistakes in your interactions with your phone or with the Tesla's display screen or with your computer or something, that really comes down to bad user interface design. That's something that the designers should have noted, and they should have designed it out of it. So anyway, in Elon Musk's driverless future, or the Model S Plaid, the idea is that since you're not supposed to interact with the machine, and it's supposed to basically drive itself and you're just there to tend it, that interface, that any kind of input or any kind of interaction by default is poor. That's a mistake. And so the affordances of the car are specifically designed to take you out of the equation. And I think that's fascinating. That's the reason why they've designed a yoke system instead of a steering wheel, because you're not really supposed to be steering anymore. You're supposed to be using the yoke as a way of kind of resting your hands, or taking over for the period of time before full self-driving happens, or if you just want to drive yourself at some point. But that those are all going to be cases that will minimize. They'll shrink and shrink and shrink over time, and that most of what you're going to be doing and interacting with Oh, wow. Poor weather detected. All right, so I guess the autopilot's still working, but it's saying that it's upset about the fact that it's raining so heavily. Interesting. So it's fascinating to see how the autopilot works in terms of bad weather. And I'll be really interested to see how the beta system works, like the new version, once eventually I get it, I hope. I'll be fascinated to see how that works in poor weather, because the current system does get upset if it rains or something too much. And of course, that's what we mostly get in the wintertime. In Georgia is not so much anything else but a lot of rain. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about that a little bit more, because I think the idea that the interface, the larger screen in the Model S, the different steering yoke instead of steering wheel, the fact that there are no stalks, all of those things are affordances that the UI team, the physical user interface team, is creating to tell you that you are no longer the driver of the car. You are going to be the passenger. And I think that that is a fascinating thing to think about, the future, the way that the interface, the car, the physicality of the car is designing you out as a driver and making you into a passenger. All right, so a quick addendum to everything. We went to the service thing. It ended up being the world's shortest service appointment, because the very, very kind service person, thank you so much for working on this, discovered that it was actually our hubcaps. So there are plastic kind of low drag hubcaps that are on top of the metal wheels, and they are kind of just creaking against the metal. So it's not a safety issue at all. It's a little bit of an annoyance. He suggested that we get some wheel wax from 3M or something like that at like Napa, and that we put that on and see if that actually smooths it out, but it definitely still creaks. I'm curious if anybody in the comments happens to have a similar problem with your new Model Y or Model 3. These are the new hubcaps, like I said, that are more silver rather than black. I'd be very curious to find out what your experience is with that. Also, I wanted to do a quick shout out to Joe Wua, who has sent me a really cool little holder for the phone that you can mount to the back of the Model Y or Model 3 display screen. And that's what I'm using right now to do the recording. I'll do a full review video of the whole thing in a little while. But in the meantime, I thought I'd let you know about that so you can order one for yourself if you're interested. There's a link in the description, and definitely check it out if you think it might be something that you could find valuable. And finally, some really interesting news that just came over the wire. According to Tasmanian, Tesla is going to build a factory in Karnataka, India, which is fascinating. That really kind of, you know, I guess globally that puts them at all the major points on the globe. Stephen Mark Ryan is convinced that that is mostly going to be solar and battery, which certainly seems reasonable, but I also think that there's a high degree of likelihood that they will be manufacturing automobiles, not just for export, but also for the internal Indian market. A lot of people think that because the traditional Indian car, is I think around $10,000 US, more or less, is the average. Whereas in the United States, I think the average is over $30,000, like $32,000, $33,000 for an average car. So, you know, that a $37,000, $40,000 car plus is just very expensive for the Indian market. But a $25,000 US car is a completely different ball game. You know, again, that's a much more expensive car, but of course people buy $150,000, $200,000 cars in the United States all the time, even though the average is much, much lower than that. Plus, there's really good logic for Tesla opening up a factory in India if they want to sell to the Indian market, because apparently tariffs in India are extremely high. Like, there's the possibility, I think if I'm remembering correctly, that tariffs are on the order of nearly 100%. So you're almost doubling the cost of the car if you purchase it from a foreign manufacturer. So it would make a whole lot of sense for them to manufacture cars in India if they plan to sell cars in India, because it will be much cheaper. Anyway, we'll see how all of that goes. I'll be very curious to find out more details as they become available, but that's super exciting news, so I wanted to just tack that on the end of this video. All right, I hope you found this episode interesting and informative in some ways. Like I said, I definitely recommend going and listening to or watching the podcast. It's absolutely fascinating. They talk about a ton of subjects. In the meantime, don't forget that you can support this channel through the Patreon link in the description, so definitely check that out. Also, we are Tesla and Amazon affiliates, also in the description. And definitely don't forget about our merch store with the All Input is Error t-shirt for a limited time only. So definitely go pick that up while it's available. And as always, please feel free to ask me questions in the comments or at my email address, which is drknowitallknows@gmail.com. Till next time, bye-bye.